ሰላም ለሰው ልጆች ፍቅር ለሰው ልጆች ሰላም ለሰው ልጆች በዓለም ዙሪያ ሁሉ ሰላም ይሁን ምድሩ ሁሉ።
The title of this webinar is Online Hate, Fake News, and the Future of Ethiopia. As much as we would love to do that, we're not here to decide on the future of the country in this Zoom webinar, but we will, of course, look at online hate, fake news, misinformation, and related topics in Ethiopia. As you know, digital technology is changing Ethiopia, and the way we communicate online has become an important part of our life. It has opened up huge opportunities across the country, whether that is supporting new businesses or opening doors for new educational opportunities or enabling families to connect across the world or attending a webinar like this one. However, this young and vibrant online space faces a huge challenge throughout the world, and particularly in Ethiopia when it comes to misinformation, false news, hate speech, which are growing trends in Ethiopia. So just to kind of give you a bit of context on the number of internet users that we have in the country, as you know, we only have one telecom provider in Ethiopia called Ethio Telecom, but currently the government is in the process of liberalizing the telecom sector. So the numbers that I'm going to tell you now will likely change, hopefully increase in the near future. But also I want you, but also our panelists to think, as we liberalize this telecom sector, how prepared are we for what will be a big change in the telecom sector and how we access internet in Ethiopia in the near future. So currently, I think we have around 23 million people who are, data and internet users, and then we have 48 million mobile service subscribers. So this is a number that I got from Ethio Telecom website, and around 7 million of them are actually social media users. So that's a huge number. And according to a recent report on social media status in Ethiopia, as of April 2021, which is last month, of those people who are using social media, 49% of them use Twitter. For my surprise, for some reason, I thought a lot of them use Facebook, but I think for some reason, or for different reason, people seems to shift from Facebook to Twitter. And then we have 30% of them using Facebook, and then we have 2.48% of them are on Instagram, which tells me that less people are probably on holiday in Ethiopia. But jokes aside, we have a great lineup of panelists from different parts of the world. So we have from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Abel Wabella. Abel is a managing director of Addis Zebe, an organization dedicated to fact checking. From Nairobi, Kenya, we have Birhan Taye. Birhan is a researcher who investigates the relationship between technology, society, and social justice. Very interesting topic. And she is a senior advisor on internet governance and policy at Internews. From London, we have Will Prescott, who is a communications manager at the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Thank you very much for joining us, our panelists. If I can start with you, Will, kind of to help us understand some of the key concepts and discussions that we will be discussing on today, could you please tell us that the work that you do at the Center for Countering Digital Hate, but also what do we mean by digital hate? And you've also heard me talking about, or at least using the words misinformation, false news, fake news interchangeably. So if you could tell us, are they all one and the same, or are they all different?
So the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, we've been going sort of less than a couple of years. The work we do is to tackle the use of digital spaces to spread hate and misinformation online. So it's very focused on people who are sort of deliberately using the internet to try and further those aims, and on the issue of what we mean by digital hate and where misinformation comes into it. We work across a range of different issues that sort of fall under those categories. So everything from racism and misogyny, trolling, also falsehoods around COVID and the vaccine to try and discourage people from getting vaccinated and protecting their health. Misinformation around elections, and also climate denial. So it's, I think what we've seen and what we've learned over the past few years is that there are different ways that people are trying to undo the progress that society has made over the last century. And they often are underpinned by the fact that the internet allows you to lie more. It allows you to spread conspiracy theories and falsehoods further than traditional media has, and that other means of communication we've used previously have, and that's affected all of those issues. It's also sort of enabled a different kind of tactics to be used by people that are pushing those ends. So I've sort of mentioned trolling and the use of online abuse to try and silence people. So illiberals will try and silence political opponents, or people of colour or women in the UK are often targeted to try and push them out of the public debate. We see the use of fake news to suggest, create a reality that supports a political viewpoint, that obviously, the people behind that don't feel that the reality that they live in does support their own political viewpoints. They have to sort of make up fake conspiracy theories and fake stories. And it's also the normalization of hatred that social media has enabled. So it allows extreme views to appear more normal because of the way we consume information on social media. So if you put something up that's factually correct, someone else puts up something that's extremely racist or untrue and shocking, that thing's going to get a lot more traction on social media. A lot more people are going to see it, and it's going to appear like that is more real or a more popular viewpoint, even though that the reason a lot of the time that it's getting so much attention is that a lot of people are appalled by it, and they make that clear. On the sort of the words themselves, misinformation is a pretty wide catching word. It essentially means untrue information, the same as falsehoods. It covers outright lies, so where people are deliberately spreading untruths. But it also covers what we saw, particularly in our organisation, we saw a lot at the outbreak of COVID, was people posting things which they'd heard which were untrue, but they weren't sort of deliberately lying. It just wasn't something that they knew at the time. So there's sort of different levels there.
If I can swiftly move to our next speaker, who will be Berhan. And a question that I have for you is if you could probably help us to kind of contextualize this in the Ethiopian context, and what are the issues when it comes to online hate speech and misinformation in Ethiopia, but also if you can say a few words about the privatization of the Ethio Telecom from an angle of, when we privatize the telecom sector, my understanding is that we will have more people coming to social media because we will have more people using internet. So I'm just wondering, in terms of managing this and controlling, are we ready for that? And if you can, contextualize this on an Ethiopian perspective, that would be great. Thanks.
The current situation in Ethiopia is quite fragile, right? So we're actively in a war, and many violence-related issues are happening across the country. But in the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen an increased amount of hateful content, violence-inciting content, and content that we normally would categorize as dangerous speech. Hate speech has become completely rampant online. So of course, as the internet penetration in the country grows, we've started to see a lot of this content. So the other part of the other factor we also can consider here is that the previous administration used to not necessarily share content online. They were not active on Twitter. They were not active on on Facebook, but government information has also moved in the online space, so has really encouraged people to move into the online space. So what we've seen is that, whenever there's an incident, whether it's, the unfortunate and really sad assassination of Hajalu, or when there's, the conflict in Tigray, or when there's, murders happening in Oromia or in Amara region or in other part of the country, we see there's, an escalated amount of content that's calling for violence online. So, and, unfortunately, this is on all platforms, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Telegram, or whichever platform that folks are using. So we also have seen, and there are documented cases of really organized misinformation and disinformation campaigns. This did not start now. This has been going on for the past few years. So one, really important case to bring, for instance, is the rumors that were started on Facebook saying that the National Elections Board chairwoman had resigned, and that content, I think this was September 2020, if I'm not mistaken, and I will definitely correct me if I'm wrong. We've seen that content go viral without any, justification, without any, one platform picking up from another. So we've seen, the narrative around the war, for instance, is extremely contested because there's so many different alternative facts about what's happening on the ground, right? Like, so the internet shutdown in the country, that happens every time there's a violence in the country, doesn't also help because the narrative of what is happening on the ground is contested, but the lack of content moderators being able to see what's happening from the diaspora is also really critical. One other, I think, key factor, especially when we're looking at misinformation and disinformation and hateful content in Ethiopia, is also the role, the fortunate or unfortunate role the diaspora plays, right? Like, so what happens in Addis is informed by what happens in DC, what happens in London, and what happens in Stockholm, and in Frankfurt, where there's significant Ethiopian diaspora, right? Like, so the culprits of disinformation and misinformation, hateful content in Ethiopia are not just folks that are living there, but are also those that are living out of the country. So there's definitely that transatlantic relationship that we see in the online space in the country. And then, of course, one thing that I really want to bring here is the lack of content moderation and the responsibility that platforms have, that they're not seen over and over, that, content that's not being taken down, even though content clearly violates, the community standards of these platforms. In addition to that, the fact that, individuals have to organize to have content taken down is really problematic. Contextualization of that community standard. Last I checked a few months back, in Afan Oromo or in Somali or in Tigrinya is not there. It's only mostly available in Amharic. So if you're an Afan Oromo speaker that sees hateful content online, you're not able, and if you don't speak other language, you're technically not able to report. The reporting mechanism within Facebook is really problematic. So platforms have also their own, very big problems that need to be addressed. One of the other things that I want to mention is that this issue is not just unique to Ethiopia. We've seen similar issues in Myanmar. We're seeing similar issues now in Palestine, where content is being censored when it's in favor of Palestinian lives, but when it's in favor of, Israeli genocide, it's not being censored. So there's relationships across many different countries, especially when it comes to platforms. Now, when we move to the issue of privatization and what does it mean when a lot of people are online, I am definitely pro privatization in many ways. I think, the privatization and the fact that I think Ethio Telecom is suffocating the youth, the opportunities that can come with by unleashing the digital economy of the country in many ways. But of course, it's the analogy that, if we privatize companies and, if we get more people are connected to the internet, there will be more hateful content. Is like, if we get more cars on the street, there will be more car accidents. Yeah, that's potentially true, but we need to bring in, policies. We need to bring in digital literacy is a big problem in the country, right? Like, so it's not just about, Abel yourself have said, there are about 7 million Facebook users in the country, but in the way that content goes viral, it shows you that it's more than that. So there's definitely a connection between the online and offline content in the country and how content goes viral. It's not necessarily on Facebook. Things are being downloaded on USB sticks, and those are the ones that are being spread across the country, right? Like, so we need to think about, what are the policies that we need to have? What are the regulations that we need to have? The current hate speech and, fake news legislation is basically toothless and useless in many ways, because it doesn't do what it needs to do, and it puts the onus on the wrong authorities in many ways. So yes, privatization is really important for many reasons, in terms of also being able to speak online, right? Like, so more people have if more people are connected to the internet, they're able to express themselves, right? Like, so, but digital literacy is important, regulation is important. So those are the few things that I can think of. Thanks.
Abel, you're the managing director of Addis Ababa. So my question for you is, one, I'm curious to know about your magazine. What do you guys do? But most importantly, what I'm interested in is to know the fact-checking service that you have, which is HackCheck. And related to that, if you could answer two questions. One, how are you tackling misinformation at Addis Ababa using this fact-checking service that you have? But also at the same time, how are you selecting topics to address them? Did you go online and find those topics, or did you kind of find a topic that probably you think is raised by the government, but as misinformation, or by international media? So yeah, if you can probably share us your experience related to the work that you do, that'd be great.
So basically, Addis Ababa is a digital media. We produce news and news items as all media outlets across the world. But we were curious about the circulation of misinformation in Ethiopian media landscape. So we start to zoom in and try to understand what we can do to add values to the information circulation in Ethiopian society. So basically, we start to look around, and we have understand that the concept of fact-checking is a very big, I can call it, industry now. Many non-media outlets and also media outlets are working on fact-checking. So we start to look for the experience in other countries. But in Ethiopia, there is no any initiative, and I start to look organization who do for Facebook as a third-party fact checker. There are two organizations which are based in another countries, which doesn't have any context about what is happening in Ethiopia. So we start to discuss about and to start the initiative. It was very, very tough because we don't know anything about fact-checking. We don't know the methodologies, the tools, even though, and also we didn't have enough support to start this. So we started a very small project with Internews. I would like to thank Internews for that. It was a very small project, but it will give us a chance to take this initiative seriously. Then after that, we start to, when we have the knowledge and information about fact-checking, we start to do fact-checking. In fact-checking, basically, for whom you are doing fact-checking is really important. So that's why we are diversifying the content we are releasing on our platform. So we do fact-checking in English because most content platforms are moderated by people who speak English language. So we want to address Facebook and other platforms to use our service, to use our help to filter their own content. So we publish in English, but also we have to inform the Ethiopian society about the content they are consuming. So Ethiopia is a very diversified country language-wise. So we pick major language. So we had fact checkers in our office in Amharic, Afan Oromo, Somali, and Tigrinya. So basically, we didn't cover all the language, but most of the people can speak either of the languages I have mentioned above. So basically, we do fact checking in very tough way. Some organizations who has a support from Facebook, they will have access to Facebook algorithm to identify potential false claims, but we doesn't have that opportunity. And also there are some tools which are specific to Facebook, which allows only for their third-party fact checker. So it's really difficult for us to get potential claims, but we follow the news trend and we'll be ready when something happens in Ethiopia. So we know how people disseminate false information. For example, if some ethnic attack happened in some place, so those people who belong to from that specific ethnic group who is victim of that violence will start to use that opportunity to advance their political agenda. So they will bring all the information across the internet, every video and photograph, and they will put it as it happened in that place. So we'll follow that and we'll try to debunk and verify that information. So basically, we follow the news. For example, when there is some development related to Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, we'll have many misinformation contents from Sudan. Even we get some contents from Ethiopia too. So at that time, we will give priority because we believe that the contents disseminated will affect the geopolitics of the region, and it will affect the peaceful negotiation the three countries have. So we will focus on that subject. And also we have been working aggressively on misinformation related to the border conflict between Ethiopia and Sudan. So basically we would like to compare the issues that the claim is related. We will pick that issue and we'll give it priority and we'll try to verify that information. When it comes to the local context, one of the difficulties of the fact checker is getting access to information. So sometimes public office holders, they will not respond to our question, even though what we do is will help their activity. We are trying to help the public, basically, which is their main responsibility to do. But we are trying to approach people from government bodies, starting from the Prime Minister office to lower level, Kabale level officials, and try to tell them. So we are like a messenger. We preach them about fact checking. Some of them don't understand what it is, but the good thing, the majority of the officials, they have bad impression about Facebook. So we will tell them somebody X who is a very bad guy is disseminating some information. So the people will kill each other because of that information. If you give us that information, we will manage to minimize that damage. So some of them has been cooperative because of these tricks.
A very quick follow-up question for you, Abel. Are there any similar groups or organizations working on Ethiopia on this topic? I think last time I checked, I've seen one similar to what you're doing, EthioCheck or Ethiopia Check. We're also doing fact-checking service. So if you can tell us if there are, but also, do you have any kind of form of collaboration? Do you work with them, or do you see them as a kind of a rival group that you're trying to win checking facts?
Absolutely the opposite, because fact-checking is really a tough job. So we most of the time we try to call Elias and discuss with him because he has much more contacts, so he can give us. In our side, we will try to follow the standard procedure across the world. So he is approaching us and he to talk to our fact checkers. So basically, we are collaborative because there is no any other organization. We had 110 million, and as you and Brian said, we are going to have many more users. So we need much more fact-checking initiative for Ethiopian public.
will to you and you know, the work that you do in your organization. And then if you can tell us, I mean, earlier you mentioned about the works that you do in terms of you know, creating awareness when it comes to COVID, but also now we're in a pandemic and we see a lot of misinformation when it comes to vaccine and vaccine hesitation, but also in the UK, where you're based, but you also, I think your organization work all over the world, when it comes to vaccine hesitation, minority and ethnic groups are just like mentioned, or they take the number of people who have been vaccinated when it comes to COVID-19 from minority and ethnic groups is very, very low. So if you can probably tell us more about that, but also you've also mentioned, or at least touched upon in your earlier presentation, about elections and how elections could also be impacted on misinformation.
Yeah, sure. So on vaccines, it's something that, you know, anti-vaccine misinformation lies it's been a long-standing issue, and it was something that in 2019 sort of became a, you know, it was in the news a little bit because Britain lost its status as a measles-free vaxxers have sort of exploited the COVID founders, that just a few people can make a huge impact. So we did a study recently that found that 2/3 of anti-vaccine content on social media originates from just 12 people and their organizations. So if you're able to build big enough following, make sure that you have people amplifying your message, even if it's untrue and actively harmful, you can have a really big impact on social media, and that's true across sort of, you know, all behaviors online really. Those 12 people are also able to make a lot of money from misinformation, and again, that's true for all sorts of malignant actors. So some of those 12 anti-vaxxers, some of them are making, or between them, they're making, you know, tens of millions of dollars a year by pulling people in, persuading them that only they know the truth, and then selling them products or selling them access to their website and you know, films and merchandise. So there's a model there as well that enables them to keep, you know, sustaining themselves and keep putting this sort of stuff out. I think it's also shown that social media companies, as Beran hinted at earlier, that they're not really willing to do the right thing unless they're properly pressured into it. So for the first few months of the pandemic, Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, YouTube were going around to different media outlets, telling them all the great things they were doing to promote good information about COVID and promote vaccine information. So we did a study where we reported 1,000 posts or videos or tweets or across the platforms where which contained anti-vaccine misinformation. We found that about 1 in 10 of them were being removed by the platforms, and the rest were just allowed to stay up without any kind of label on them, you know, no fact check and they weren't removed. And partly the reason for that is that the audience for anti-vaxxers is now so big. It's almost 60 million followers of the anti-vax accounts that we follow, and that's really just across the UK, US, Canada and Australia mainly, because we're sort of looking at English language accounts, and that audience is worth a lot of money to social media companies. So yeah, I think it's sort of shown the damage really that that social media, by not acting on this stuff, is enabling. On the democratic stuff that you mentioned, I think we've sort of got two kind of mirror image problems in the world, speaking quite broadly. So in liberal democracies, UK, Europe, US, but also liberal democracies across the world, where we don't work, but this is the impression I get, that social media platforms there are sort of because they fail to deal with misinformation and remove it. Anti-democrats, people who oppose democracy and are willing to use anti-democratic means to try and swing elections, are able to influence elections and influence people's perception of democracy in a negative way, and stop them believing that it's the right thing. On the flip side to that, you've got authoritarian countries where the issue is very different. Again, this is, I think we mentioned already, but where platforms are sort of a lot more willing to censor certain types of content based on the wishes of the authoritarian regimes of those countries, because the risk otherwise is that the government sort of switch off the social media platform and stop them operating in that country. So it's two quite different problems. I think in sort of liberal democracies as well, it's quite broad. So as the last point I'll make, but in the US, you saw a situation where really from a disinformation campaign was supported from the White House under Donald Trump. He was able to persuade huge sections of the population that the election was being stolen from him by illegal means, and then he was able to amplify those claims, but he had fake news websites that were putting out stories every day about that. There were videos and other content shared across social media. So it can be led by political parties and political actors. But then in the UK, we had a situation, it was in the papers just this weekend, where a local council election was swung because local people had set up a Facebook group, which a lot of people in the town joined for sort of news about the community. The person that set it up really didn't like the leader of the council, so he started putting, or it sort of allowed lots of fake stories about the council leader, and sort of blamed him for all sorts of really awful, nasty things, which are just absolutely, not true, and in the paper utterly disproven. But because it wasn't, it's not like a newspaper where there's an editor to fact check this stuff before it goes out. It was sort of seen as being responsible for losing this council leader his position. So it's a problem from the point at which huge political actors like the president are involved in it, right down to local community Facebook groups, which change people's opinions of their local elected representatives.
If I can come to you, Burhan, and comment related to the election that we're going to have it at some point, either in July or August or September, how will fake news and hate speech impact the upcoming election?
Sure. Yeah, so on the election, if I'm not mistaken, and I will definitely correct me on this again, they might have given a date, right? So they said in 3 weeks. But so for the election, I think, what we're most likely going to see is not going to be anything different than what we've already seen in the online space in Ethiopia, where all issues are going to be contested now. When as we head to election, some of the things that of course we worry about is false claims of fraud, or claims of mismanagement that are not proved. Incitement of violence is really it's going to be a big issue, and then verifying certain incidents, right? So they have about, I think, 46,000 polling stations. So trying to get correct information about incidents that might have occurred, potentially incidents might occur. So there's going to be a lot of issues. There needs to be a lot of fact checking and verification. But there hasn't been that much work on that until now, so we don't expect anything grand to happen in 3 weeks. So that's something that we really worry about. So people need to be diligent. Media houses need to be super diligent, including foreign media houses that we've seen spreading misinformation in the past few days as well. So those are going to be really critical ones. And of course, the National Election Board also has a really key role to play here, but they're outnumbered. You know, I don't think they have sufficient number of people to be able to cover 46,000 polling stations. So that's going to be an issue. Then now, when it comes to social media platforms, we've asked over and over and over again to Facebook and other platforms to have an emergency escalation system, which has not been done, as far as we know, to increase the number of content moderators in all languages in Ethiopia, especially like at least the 4 key main languages that are spoken in the country. We haven't seen that happen. You know, if we look at a year ago, there were a lot of public commitments that Facebook has made to us and to other organizations as well, which have not been delivered upon. And we don't expect anything magical to happen in the next few weeks. So they don't, they don't do the work of amplifying good voices, which I don't think is, can be contentious. In the Ethiopian context, a good voice is really depends on who you're talking to. But at least the least they can do is really take down the content that's clearly in violation of their community standards. So there are, I have in front of me like an Excel sheet full of content that's saying we should forget killing the old people, go kill a certain ethnic group of children. That's the sort of content they're not taking down. It's not even the luxury of whether we can ask questions of is this contentious topic, is this something is not where we are now. Where we are now is that they're not even taking down content that's clearly violating their standards. So that's sort of where we are. We don't expect anything magical to happen. I wish it could, and that's what I pray for, but I don't think, unless we have divine intervention happening before the election, it's not coming anytime soon.
A question that comes from Yidnekacho is, that's for you, Abel. I believe fact-checking can be better informed by some form of crowdsourcing. Have you thought of it or implemented it in some way? So it's a crowdsourcing issue. The second question for you again is from Sharon. It says, how wide is the distribution of the fact-checking you're doing? So if you can address those 2 questions about quickly, that'll be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let me start from the question from Nakacho. Yeah, absolutely right. We have to shift from searching and debunking each story by ourselves. It's better to inform the public about the developments and the trends of disinformation across the world, and specifically to Ethiopia. So basically, we are thinking about it. We have one project which focus on media literacy. So we are going to approach as much as we can, many potential social media influencers. So we are collaborating with IMS on that project. And also we think that fact-checking is not currently what we do. We search for claim and debunking and rating it as false, manipulated or something, but it's not that. It is beyond that. So we have to have a mechanism as a society to counter disinformation. So in our understanding, because our knowledge about the fact-checking and the trends is going bigger, so we are planning to approach the case of fact-checking in a better way. So we are going to collaborate with one local NGO called Inform Africa to upgrade our activities. When we come to the distribution, we had a better presence on Twitter and other social media platforms, and also we publish the stories in the website. So we had a reasonable visibility, but as a fact-checking, most fact-checking organization who has a partnership with Facebook as a third-party fact-checker, they have a support from Facebook. They will boost that content, and also they will embed each fact-checked article under the potential claims. So basically, we are working harder to do that, but the response from Facebook is still very, very disappointing. We are pushing as much as we can, but still they are malingering, but we'll keep doing that.
What can individuals do to combat hate speech and misinformation. The question is, how can we put pressure on social media companies or even governments to kind of press change when it comes to misinformation and hate speech?
I think the third option, to be honest, is digital literacy. We're still a country that the literacy rate is really low, right? Like, people don't understand that anybody can upload a YouTube video. Like, literally, that's like the basic. We need to have the most basic conversation of like, how does one edit and upload a YouTube video? Just because it says news doesn't necessarily mean it's news, right? Like, so we need to really sensitize and really raise awareness on these issues. So that's the first one. And I think the government has completely failed to do that. The Communications Authority, Broadcasting Authority, all of them collectively have failed to do that. So that's one thing that needs to be done. The second thing is, we've seen in a country like Ethiopia, where hate speech and violence inciting content is so prevalent and so problematic, and legislation like that you'd assume would have averted some of the issues that we've seen, but it has failed to do that. And we've been in conversation, and Abel knows, and many of us know, that we've been in conversation with the government when they were in the process of drafting this law, that it's not going to answer the core questions, and it's not going to really help the situation that's on the ground. And to be honest, that's what it has done now. The first individuals to be arrested with using this law were journalists, right? Like, so it's using to censor legitimate voices, and has done nothing on the content that's dangerous, right? Like, so the third, I think, thing that needs to be done is also give more room to the courts to be able to sort of adjudicate and arbitrate on the issue of hateful content and hate speech, right? We do have in the Constitution that freedom of expression is limited, and that limitation is supposed to be governed by the court, not by Facebook, not by the government. The courts are the ones that are designed to do this. So we need to be able to do that more.
Here is a country which is betrayed by her educated people. So basically, most people who has got a better education are responsible for protecting the society from the disinformation we are facing. So basically, hate speech and other related things are information disorder, basically there, how we are circulating the information we get. So social media has upgrade and give us easy access to do that. But information, we have to sort a mechanism to solve those problems. So individuals will have a major role. First, they don't have to disseminate the information by themselves. So all the skills are available on the internet, so they can equip themselves, and also they have to take part on initiative. I really appreciate what Redact is doing. There are so many initiatives, but their capacity is very limited. So we have to collaborate each other, and we have to work together as a reasonable and rational adult persons. So if we come together, we can counter the disinformation we are facing. I better speak about the organization. So basically, I have a complaint on Facebook specifically because they are working with other third-party fact checkers, which are based in other countries. Most of the editors don't understand the situation on the ground, so they didn't want to support what is currently we are doing on the ground, but they think Ethiopian community as a good marketplace because we had 100+ million population. So we, the people in initiative, what as Redact has started, we have to come up together and find out ways to address our concern, but also we have to develop the capacity. I don't want to blame those organizations alone. We have to have a local capacity. We have to build our capacity. We have to know the trends. We have to learn the tools and the methodologies, and also we have to be part of the global initiative to counter disinformation. We, as an organization, we are going to join international fact checkers networks. We are on the process. It's very tough, but we have.
We'll quickly, if possible, in 30 seconds or in 60 seconds, what can individuals do to combat hate speech? I know it's a big topic. We can go and talk for the whole day or night. But quickly, if you can comment on it.
I think the main thing is understanding that whereas in the offline world, if someone is saying something that's untrue or hurtful, we might go over and say to them pretty loudly so everyone else can hear that's wrong or whatever, because we don't want people to get the wrong impression. Online is different. So if you engage with misinformation or hate speech online, you are sharing it to your followers, you're sharing it to more people, as it tells the algorithm it's good content and it's engaging, so it shows it to more people. So you've got to come up with different ways for taking it on. Better than engaging is to just drown it out. So post good, positive information that's true. If you see someone saying that vaccines don't work, don't engage with that. Post something that says vaccines do work, and that's sort of the best way that we can. The way social media is built, we can game it to tip it in our balance rather than in the balance of buyers and haters.
Thank you very much, Will. I think now I don't think so we have time, but yeah, we've not come to the end of this webinar. I just want to say thank you very much for everyone. Thank you very much for our fantastic speakers, but also thank you everyone for the questions that we've asked. For our participants, I also would like to say thank you for organizers, Redact, and everyone who helped us behind the scene when it comes to the take. If you want to reach out to Redact, please reach out using their website. That's www.redact.org.uk. They've also put the website in the chat box so you can access it there. That's it for me. Thank you very much. Bye.
ለሰው ልጆች ሰላም